Karen demands VIP table, claims she knows the owner. But surprise, I'm the owner. Hello, read it. Karen arrived at the restaurant with her group of 5, a whirlwind of energy and overconfidence. She moved with the assurance of someone who believed the world bent to her will. It was clear from the outset that she was the self-appointed leader of the group, which consisted of younger women who looked to her for guidance. Karen wasted no time announcing to her companions how exclusive the restaurant was, how fantastic the food would be, and how they might even spot a celebrity or two. Her voice carried through the air as she hyped the experience, painting the establishment as a pinnacle of luxury and sophistication. As the group reached the entrance, Karen approached the host station where the owner was stationed, greeting guests and managing the evening's bustling operations. The group's attire suggested they were dressed for a night out, each of them radiating the confidence of youth and privilege. Karen, slightly older than the others, exuded an air of entitlement that set the tone for the interaction. She immediately requested a table for 6, her tone leaving little room for negotiation. When asked if she had a reservation, Karen paused, seemingly surprised by the question. She quickly waved it off and declared that a reservation wasn't necessary. She confidently explained that the owner, a supposed personal friend of hers, always kept a table open for special guests like her. Karen's companions looked impressed, as though her connections had elevated their own status for the evening. What Karen didn't know, however, was that the person she was addressing wasn't just the host, but the actual owner of the restaurant. Amused but cautious, the owner decided not to reveal the truth just yet, opting instead to observe how far Karen would take her charade. This wasn't just any night at the restaurant. It was the height of the holiday season, one of the busiest and most important times of the year. The restaurant's tables were fully booked, with reservations made as far back as July for the December rush. The business had come a long way from its humble beginnings decades ago. Founded in the 1970s by Italian immigrants, the restaurant had been a cornerstone of the community for generations. When the founder's son and daughter-in-law took over, they expanded and modernized the space, cementing its reputation as a beloved local institution. Several years ago, the restaurant had been passed down to the current owner when their parents retired. While the parents retained a small percentage of the business for financial security, the younger generation took full responsibility for its future. The transition was not without its challenges. The new owner embarked on an ambitious plan to revamp the restaurant, taking out a significant loan to fund renovations, redesign the logo, and launch a marketing campaign to attract a new wave of customers. They reached out to local and national publications, food bloggers, and influencers to drum up excitement. In the early days, the gamble seemed risky. The influx of new customers was slow, and doubts crept in about whether the changes had been a mistake. The fear of squandering a 3-generation legacy weighed heavily. But as time went on, the efforts began to pay off. A local YouTuber featured the restaurant in a video, sparking interest among their audience. Reviews poured in, and word of mouth spread. Soon, even Mondays saw a significant uptick in diners, and by December, the restaurant had become a destination for large events and high-profile clientele. Celebrities occasionally graced its tables, adding to its allure. Reservations for the holiday season became highly coveted, turning the restaurant into a hub of activity. The owner was not one to bask in the glow of success from behind a desk. On any given night, they could be found working alongside their staff, whether it meant greeting customers, cleaning tables, or ensuring every detail of an event was perfect. On nights like this, when the restaurant was packed with guests, they donned a formal jacket and took charge, embodying the spirit of the establishment. As Karen and her group stood at the entrance, the owner took in the scene. Karen spoke with an air of authority, recounting her supposed friendship with the owner and her confidence in gaining access to a VIP table without prior arrangements. It was a bold claim, but one that fell flat given that the very person she was claiming to know stood right in front of her, entirely unrecognized. The owner found the situation both amusing and frustrating. It was evident Karen believed her bravado and charm would grant her privileges beyond what others could expect. Politely but firmly, the owner informed Karen that seating was only available for those with reservations. It was a carefully measured response, designed to maintain professionalism while setting a boundary. Karen's reaction revealed her disbelief, but she quickly masked it with another layer of confidence, reiterating her imagined connection to the owner. As the exchange unfolded, the owner decided to let the situation play out further, curious about how far Karen was willing to take her performance. The owner stood firm at the entrance, calmly informing Karen that the restaurant was fully booked, leaving no seats available for her group. Though it would have been easy to expose Karen's false claims by stating outright that she had never spoken to the owner, the decision was made to exercise restraint. There was no desire to publicly humiliate her in front of her friends, especially given how determined she seemed to maintain the illusion of importance. For the moment, it seemed best to observe the situation unfold. Karen, however, was not one to back down easily. She tilted her chin upward and shifted gears, instructing one of her companions to take a picture of the host. With exaggerated confidence, she loudly declared her intent to contact the owner and ensure that the staff member in question faced consequences, alluding to demotions or even dismissal. Her words were sharp, aimed directly at the person standing before her, as though her sheer audacity could force them into submission. The other women, seemingly emboldened by her brazenness, chimed in with comments of their own, snickering and sneering at the idea of the host losing their job. It was hard to tell if Karen's friends truly believed her claims of knowing the owner or if they were merely playing along, swept up in her dominating personality. Whatever the case, they echoed her sentiments, further adding to the cacophony of condescension. Karen, seeing no immediate effect from her threats, continued to escalate her behavior. She leaned into her role of authority, pointing fingers and making scornful remarks about the apparent incompetence of the host. Her tone was patronizing, her words carefully chosen to belittle and demean. She painted herself as a figure of power, someone who could make or break the careers of those beneath her. For the owner, the moment called for decisive action. It had already been a long and challenging day, and the interaction with Karen was pushing the limits of patience. There were 3 clear paths forward: reveal the truth and call Karen out, let her have the table without resistance, or take a different approach, one that would ensure Karen and her group would think twice before attempting such behavior again. After a moment of reflection, the owner chose the third option, resolving to teach Karen a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. With a calm and accommodating smile, the owner changed their demeanor entirely, offering Karen an apology and inviting the group to follow them to a table. Karen's confidence soared as she was led to one of the VIP tables, a coveted spot typically reserved for celebrities and high-profile clients. These tables came with a hefty price tag, but Karen and her companions were blissfully unaware of this detail. Instead, Karen accepted the gesture as validation of her perceived status, basking in the attention as they were seated. The owner assured Karen that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be complimentary as an apology for any perceived inconvenience. Karen, clearly pleased with herself, handed over her credit card and ID with a flourish, declaring her intention to cover the evening for her friends. Her companions reacted with excitement, marveling at her generosity and eagerly awaiting the night ahead. The owner took their orders, noting their preference for premium cocktails, and began the service with efficiency and precision. As the evening unfolded, Karen's group became increasingly focused on the drinks rather than the food. The cocktails, carefully curated and priced at a premium, were flowing freely. The owner ensured that the first 3 rounds were delivered promptly, knowing the complimentary offer would lull the group into a false sense of security. When food service was delayed, explained as a result of the restaurant's high volume that evening, Karen and her friends seemed unbothered, their attention fully consumed by the endless rounds of beverages. By the time appetizers arrived, the women had already consumed 3 rounds of cocktails on empty stomachs. Their boisterous laughter and exaggerated gestures filled the room, drawing occasional glances from other diners. Karen remained at the center of it all, orchestrating the revelry and ordering additional drinks with abandon. When the appetizers were finished, they ordered yet another round, oblivious to the mounting cost. As the main courses were prepared, the group continued to drink, their behavior becoming more uninhibited. The combination of alcohol and a lack of food only intensified their state, turning what might have been a celebratory dinner into a spectacle of excess. Karen's earlier air of authority had given way to intoxicated bravado, her once calculated remarks now slurred and incoherent. The others followed suit, thoroughly enjoying themselves under the assumption that their night of indulgence would come at little to no cost. Unbeknownst to them, the VIP table they occupied carried a significant fee, a fact the owner had opted not to disclose. While the initial rounds of drinks were free, every subsequent order was meticulously added to the bill. The premium cocktails they had consumed so enthusiastically were among the most expensive items on the menu, carefully crafted with high-end ingredients to justify their cost. Karen and her friends, lost in their celebration, remained completely unaware of the financial implications of their choices. By the time the main courses were served, the group was thoroughly intoxicated. They ate without restraint, ordering additional drinks to accompany each course. Their laughter echoed through the restaurant, a cacophony of indulgence and obliviousness. The owner, meanwhile, observed quietly from a distance, ensuring that every item was accounted for on the final bill. What had started as an attempt to bully their way into a VIP experience was now shaping up to be an expensive lesson in humility. Karen and her entourage continued their evening, seemingly oblivious to the mounting costs. The VIP table they occupied was not just a prestigious spot. It came with a menu designed specifically for high-profile guests. These menus excluded prices, a common industry practice for luxury experiences, and offered items far more exclusive and costly than those on the standard menu. Delicacies such as white truffles, black caviar dishes, and specially imported West Coast oysters were just a few of the choices Karen and her friends indulged in without a second thought. Their orders were made with a carefree attitude, as if the night were a fantasy where consequences didn't exist. For the owner, watching the scene unfold sparked conflicting emotions. There was a fleeting sense of guilt over the lesson being orchestrated. It was possible, they thought, that Karen's companions weren't fully aware of the consequences they were walking into. But every time doubt crept in, it was swiftly erased by the group's behavior. Karen and her friends repeatedly made belittling remarks, targeting the staff and the very person ensuring their experience was flawless. One of the young women had audibly questioned whether the owner's life was pointless since they had chosen a career as a server. Another remarked on the perceived ease of manipulating the staff, confidently proclaiming they could secure VIP treatment whenever they wanted. Their disdain didn't stop there. Karen's companions whispered and giggled about the owner's appearance, commenting that while he was cute, his job made him undateable. These remarks, dripping with condescension, were overheard by the very person they targeted. It was a stark reminder of the group's entitlement and lack of awareness. As the night wore on, the owner's resolve strengthened. Any hesitation about the unfolding plan melted away in the face of their ongoing arrogance. The group's carelessness extended to their orders. Drinks flowed freely as the women indulged in round after round of premium cocktails, each more elaborate and costly than the last. The free beverages offered at the start of the evening had long since been consumed, yet they continued to order without restraint. Their enthusiasm for luxury cocktails eclipsed any concern for the delayed arrival of food. By the time appetizers arrived, they were thoroughly intoxicated, their laughter louder and their comments more brash. As more dishes and drinks arrived, the group's behavior became increasingly uninhibited. They showed no concern for the extravagance of their orders, convinced that Karen's supposed connection with the owner guaranteed them immunity from repercussions. They had no idea the VIP table they were occupying came with a hefty surcharge, a fact the owner had deliberately chosen not to disclose. Every sip of their handcrafted cocktails, every bite of their truffle-laden dishes, was contributing to a bill they had yet to even consider. By the time the night began winding down, the individual bills for each woman had climbed to between $500 and $600. Karen, as the self-proclaimed host of the evening, was presented with the total bill for the group, $4,232.23, including tax and tip. The moment Karen saw the amount, her demeanor changed completely. The confident, self-assured woman who had dominated the evening was suddenly pale, her face frozen in shock. The transformation was almost instantaneous, as though the reality of the situation had hit her like a physical blow. Karen summoned the owner, clutching the bill in disbelief, and demanded to know if it was a mistake. Her voice, once full of condescension, now carried a note of panic. The owner remained composed, taking the bill back and glancing over it with feigned concern. After a brief pause, they apologized and assured her they would correct the error. Karen's relief was visible. She leaned back in her chair, shaking her head and muttering insults under her breath, as though the issue was merely the result of incompetence. When the owner returned with the corrected bill, Karen's relief was short-lived. The total remained unchanged. She stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to fury. She called the owner back, her voice rising as she demanded an explanation. The women around her grew quieter, their earlier confidence replaced by nervous glances as they began to sense the gravity of the situation. They huddled together over the bill, pulling out their phones to recalculate the total themselves. Each line item was scrutinized, from the complimentary drinks to the luxurious entrees and cocktails. Slowly, the reality of the charges dawned on them. Karen, visibly flustered, abruptly excused herself and rushed to the restroom. Her departure left the table in silence, her friends exchanging anxious looks. The owner watched discreetly, aware that this might be an attempt to escape responsibility. However, Karen's credit card and ID remained in their possession, providing a safety net against a potential dine and dash. After 10 minutes, Karen returned. Her makeup was freshly reapplied, but the telltale signs of tears were still evident. Her eyes were slightly red, and her demeanor had shifted from outrage to desperation. She approached the owner with a renewed sense of determination and launched into a tirade about the supposed poor quality of the food and drinks. Every minor inconvenience was exaggerated as she tried to negotiate a reduction in the bill. She argued that the meal hadn't met her expectations and demanded that at least half of the charges be waived. Her companions, who had earlier been reveling in the luxury of the evening, now sat awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Karen's desperation grew as she attempted to shift responsibility to her friends, suggesting that they could help cover the cost despite having earlier declared the night to be her treat. Then, as though struck by inspiration, she once again invoked her supposed relationship with the owner. She confidently claimed that the Real owner would understand and urged the host to reach out to them. The owner, maintaining an air of calm professionalism, politely declined to adjust the bill. In a final, desperate move, Karen pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her messages and triumphantly displayed a conversation with someone listed as owner, restaurant name. It was immediately clear what Karen had been doing during her absence in the restroom. Karen's return from the restroom marked the beginning of her final, desperate attempt to avoid the consequences of her evening. She confidently presented her phone, showing a series of text messages purportedly exchanged with the restaurant's owner. The name displayed in her contacts list was a combination of the restaurant's name and the title owner, suggesting a clumsy attempt to establish credibility. It didn't take long for the owner to piece together what had likely happened. Karen had changed the name of one of her companions in her contacts, deleting previous messages to fabricate this new proof during her time away. The owner took the phone from her outstretched hand and carefully reviewed the messages, noting their amateurish tone. With calm professionalism, they tapped the contact information and revealed the number associated with the messages. Without hesitation, the owner informed Karen that this was not their phone number. Karen's response was immediate and defensive. She insisted the owner had multiple phones for business and argued that it was impossible for any single person, especially a waiter, to know all of them. Karen's resolve was met with an offer. The owner suggested they call the number she claimed belonged to the owner. If the person on the other end confirmed that the bill should be reduced, then the discount would be granted. The suggestion caused Karen's composure to crack. She erupted into a rant, her voice growing louder with every word. Her protest drew the attention of the remaining diners, who turned to watch the scene unfold. It was clear to the owner that the situation had reached its tipping point, and it was time to put an end to the charade. The owner's tone shifted, losing its conciliatory edge. Addressing Karen with authority, They told her to stop her antics and drop the facade. They made it clear that she did not know the owner, had never been to the restaurant before, and had fabricated her entire story. The sharpness of their words caught Karen off guard, and she faltered in her attempts to defend herself. The owner continued, recounting the history of the establishment. They explained that the restaurant had been founded by their grandfather, nurtured by their family for generations, and was now solely owned and operated by them. Karen's claims were baseless, and her pretenses had unraveled completely. Karen's companions, the baby Karens, were stunned into silence, their earlier arrogance replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Karen herself was reduced to tears, her bravado shattered. The owner calmly reminded her of the generosity she had already been shown. A VIP table, 3 complimentary rounds of drinks, and the kind of service usually reserved for the restaurant's most valued guests. Despite this, Karen's group had run up an enormous bill, and the owner made it clear that if it wasn't paid in full, the police would be called and Karen's identification handed over. Defeated, Karen signed the bill, her tears falling onto the receipt as she handed it back. Her companions scrambled to gather whatever cash they had, contributing small amounts in an effort to alleviate her burden. They promised to repay her the remainder later, their earlier camaraderie now replaced with guilt and discomfort. The group left the restaurant in silence, their once celebratory night having ended in humiliation. 2 days later, the fallout from the incident resurfaced. An angry man arrived at the restaurant, demanding to speak with the owner. One of the bartenders relayed the message to the back office, where the owner was working, and the man was asked to wait. With him was Karen, her head bowed, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the establishment. After half an hour, the owner brought them into the office and closed the door, ready to address whatever grievances they had brought. The owner had anticipated the possibility of a follow-up confrontation and was prepared. They played highlights from the restaurant's security footage, which included high-quality audio due to the recording system in the VIP area. Every interaction, every disparaging comment, every extravagant order, everything was laid bare in crisp detail. The man, who had entered the office full of righteous indignation, grew increasingly quiet as the footage continued. Karen sat stiffly beside him, her face pale and her expression frozen as her actions and words were replayed. When the footage ended, the man said nothing to the owner. Instead, he turned to Karen, his voice filled with anger as he demanded explanations. Karen attempted to stammer a response, but he didn't let her finish. Without another word to the owner, the man stormed out of the office, dragging Karen along as he berated her all the way out of the restaurant. It was the last the owner ever saw or heard from them. As a personal memento, the owner framed the original bill, minus the additional $120 for the oysters Karen's group hadn't ordered, and placed it on their desk as a reminder of the night. In hindsight, the financial loss was negligible. The VIP table had been intended to remain empty that evening, so the restaurant hadn't missed out on expected revenue. The drinks and service offered to Karen's group were a calculated expense, and the satisfaction of teaching an unforgettable lesson was worth every penny. By the time the evening concluded, the restaurant had more than recouped the value of the complimentary drinks given to Karen's group. Their extravagant ordering of high-end food and premium cocktails resulted in a bill that far exceeded any initial concessions. The VIP table, typically left vacant unless reserved by a celebrity or special guest, had proven to be a brilliant tool in this unplanned lesson in accountability. The financial gains were secondary to the moral victory, an undeniable assertion that entitlement would not be rewarded. Reflecting on the events, the owner couldn't help but fixate on a few details that stood out from the night. The most troubling part of the encounter wasn't the group's brazen attempt to lie their way into the VIP section, or even Karen's desperate fabrications to avoid the consequences of her actions. What truly lingered was the attitude they displayed toward the value of work, particularly the cruel comment made by one of Karen's friends. The young woman's casual remark about the owner's supposed failure in life, that their existence must feel meaningless because they worked as a server, revealed an appallingly skewed worldview. Initially, the owner had considered softening their approach. There had been moments when the severity of their plan gave them pause. especially given the naivety that some of the younger members of the group seemed to exhibit. But that comment, the sheer audacity of someone looking down on honest, hard work, erased any hesitation. It wasn't just an insult. It was a symptom of a deeper entitlement. Karen and her friends viewed the world through a distorted lens where status and income dictated a person's worth. For the owner, who had grown up working in the restaurant their family had built over generations, such a mindset was both offensive and deeply flawed. The restaurant was more than a business. It was a legacy born from the grit and determination of the owner's grandparents, who had immigrated to the country with little more than their skills and a dream. Over decades, the family had poured their hearts into making it thrive, and each generation added its own layer of sacrifice and innovation. To dismiss such effort as meaningless because it involved serving others revealed an ignorance that was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about teaching Karen a lesson. It was about standing up for every worker who had ever been treated as invisible or unworthy because of their job. The fallout from the night took an unexpected turn 2 days later. Karen's father arrived at the restaurant, visibly agitated. He was a large man, his presence commanding as he demanded to speak with the owner. Accompanying him was Karen, though her demeanor couldn't have been more different. She walked a step behind him, her shoulders hunched and her head bowed, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the restaurant. The defiance she had displayed during her visit was gone, replaced by quiet shame. When the bartender relayed the message to the back office, the owner was in the middle of administrative tasks and asked the pair to wait. The father's irritation grew as he paced the waiting area, his frustration apparent in his sharp gestures and occasional glances toward his daughter. Karen, meanwhile, sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale. The 30-minute wait seemed to drag on for both of them, heightening the tension. Finally, the owner emerged and invited them into the office. The father wasted no time launching into his grievances. He accused the restaurant of mistreating his daughter, claiming she had been unfairly humiliated and overcharged. He spoke with the conviction of someone who believed he had been wronged, his voice rising as he demanded an explanation. Karen sat silently beside him, her eyes fixed on the floor, her discomfort palpable. The owner listened patiently, allowing the man to air his complaints without interruption. Then, without a word, they turned to their computer and queued up the security footage from the night in question. The VIP section surveillance system had been installed to ensure accountability in such high-stakes interactions. The high-quality video and audio captured every detail of the group's behavior. Their disparaging remarks, their entitled attitude, and even Karen's clumsy attempt to fabricate text messages from the owner. The recording left nothing to interpretation. As the footage played, the father's expression shifted. His anger gave way to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally to quiet fury. He glanced at his daughter periodically, each look growing colder and more incredulous as the extent of her actions was revealed. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her face pale and her breathing shallow. She flinched visibly at key moments in the recording, particularly when her own voice was replayed mocking the staff and concocting lies to manipulate the situation. When the footage ended, the owner turned to the father, waiting for his response. For a long moment, he said nothing. The room was thick with tension as he processed what he had seen. Finally, he turned to Karen, his voice low and sharp. His questions came quickly and angrily. How could she have lied to him? How could she have behaved so disgracefully? Karen tried to respond, her voice barely above a whisper, but her father cut her off, refusing to hear excuses. The father stood abruptly, grabbed Karen by the arm, and began dragging her toward the door. He paused only briefly to apologize to the owner, his tone clipped and embarrassed. Karen didn't resist, her head bowed as she followed him out of the office and through the restaurant. The sounds of his scolding carried across the dining room, drawing the attention of diners and staff alike. His voice rose as he berated her, questioning her choices and making it clear that she would face consequences for her actions. They left the restaurant, the door swinging shut behind them, leaving behind a stunned silence. The owner, reflecting on the events, felt a sense of closure. The framed bill from that night, a staggering $4,232.23, minus the $120 oysters that weren't included, now sat prominently on their desk. It wasn't just a reminder of Karen's night of reckoning, but a symbol of something deeper. It represented the importance of standing up for oneself, for one's staff, and for the dignity of honest work. The restaurant had not lost anything that night. In fact, it had gained a story that would resonate for years. While the event sparked mixed reactions from those who heard the story, the owner felt no regret. Some criticized the use of surveillance audio, while others praised the owner for their composure and resolve. For the owner, the decision had been clear. The restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a legacy, a testament to generations of hard work and perseverance. Allowing Karen's entitlement to go unchecked would have been a betrayal of those values. Karen and her group never returned to the restaurant, and their absence was a welcome relief. The restaurant continued to thrive, its reputation as a place of excellence and integrity remaining intact. For the owner, the events of that night were a powerful reminder that dignity and respect are non-negotiable. The framed bill, a quiet yet powerful symbol of justice served, stood as a testament to the lessons learned and the values upheld.